I am honored to introduce our next speaker, Ray Archuleta. A certified professional soil scientist, Mr. Archuleta is co-founder of Soil Health Consultants and the Soil Health Academy, where he teaches techniques for increasing crop nutrient density and improving soil resiliency using sound ecological principles and biomimicry. With more than 30 years' experience as a soil conservationist, water quality specialist, and conservation agronomist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, Mr. Archuleta, known widely and fondly as Ray the Soil Guy, is regarded as one of the foremost experts in sustainable soil management and regenerative agricultural practice. He has headlined numerous agronomy conferences, and his work has been featured in media ranging from The Progressive Farmer to agriculture.com. Though I suspect he's most proud of the fact that he's worked directly with thousands of farmers, providing practical advice that connects scientific research with hands in the dirt how-to. Indeed, Mr. Archuleta is also a farmer. He and his family own and operate a 150-acre ranch in Seymour, Missouri. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Archuleta.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Well, I'm going to tell you, this is a class act. This is an amazing, amazing conference. Dr. Becky, thank you so much, and Lisa, and Dr. Jim, and all that we use in the South. Dr. Jim, Dr. Becky, all those kind of approaches. Excellent conference. Now, what I want to do is a favor. I want to ask a favor from the audience. And I always do this when I go give a talk because it just gives me energy to go to the next conference, the next conference. I want you to give me an incredibly good morning. Good morning. David, who said Minnesota people don't have passion? They do. Fantastic. Folks, you don't know how much I needed that, and I appreciate that. It gives me, I tell you, always, you are the ones that give me hope. My talk is called Healing the Land, One Heart, One Mind at a Time. And I'm going to tell you, Frank, you know, Hugh was probably considered the soil prophet. I'm the minor prophet, and I mean really minor. Folks, I appreciate it, Frank, because you gave a history of an agency that I worked for 30 years. I have so much passion, so much love for that agency. And so I'm going to show you kind of the journey real quickly. How are we doing today after spending billions, maybe even trillions of dollars, and let's find out how we're doing. This is Texas, 2016. Can you see all the replicated plots? All the research? Can you see all the money blowing? We have spent billions on that. We go to the top universities, top schools, and yet, we still have this, ladies and gentlemen. This is 2016. How about Colorado? Look at it, 1935, and look at on the picture on the left. Do you notice the difference in the color of the soils? How about our beloved Arkansas, where they get 50 or 60 inches of rain? How about our beloved Iowa, 2017? In fact, I was told that people got killed on the road when that happened. As I travel the whole country, I take my little camera, I take pictures, flying over 30,000 feet. Took that picture as I was going to New Jersey. And this is one of my favorite slides when I go teach. I said, our lakes and rivers are filled with nutrient and conservation plans, but not crystal clear with understanding. Doesn't sit very well that an agency like ours touted planning. Made people very upset. See, it's not that I'm against planning. But I am not about the process. I'm about the goal. And I think we missed it. The goal should have always been understanding. That's the goal. Not tools, not plans. They're both needed. Look what happened when we don't have the right goal in mind. As you see the picture, on the top you see a tilled soil, no aggregation, no pore space. A no-till soil has lots of pores, a lot of cottage cheese. That is critical. Microbes create that. On the other side of the picture, you'll see a landscape. The reason I titled that is I was a reductionist conservation putting diapers on the land. What do I mean by diapers? The only functioning soil on that picture is where the filter strips, the windbreaks, all where the diapers are at, the soil is functioning. See, because most people don't realize unless you have a living plant all the time, like the diapers do, you're not building aggregates. You're not feeding biology. This is what I learned after 8 years of university. I've learned reductionist science. And please, it's not also the university's problem either, or fault, total. It has gone back hundreds of years where we learned mechanicistic reductionism. It came back way from Newton's era, and it permeated our European culture. And then comes the global warming situation, CO2. When the first CO2 measurement was happening on the volcano of Hawaii, and it seems like when the message came out, it came that it was two separate issues, land degradation and CO2 emission. But in reality, it was always one thing. It was always one thing. Let me give you a perspective. I just turned 57. I graduated in 1961. This is the research station at New Mexico State where I went to college. Ladies and gentlemen, I never saw that. Look at the native range. This is what I grew up seeing. See, I love that word, Frank, context. See, I interpret everything the way I looked at the natural system from this context. This is the context I should have been able to see. Most landowners, most producers don't realize they're in a degraded context, in a degraded soil. So here, another point is very critical. So here, when you drive through the 5 largest states or all over the West, what I see now is bare soil in between the plants. Scientists, range scientists says, well, that can't be fixed because those plants are allelopathic and release chemical messengers and suppress the grass. That's what I was taught in range. So you have millions of acres, maybe even billions of acres throughout the world that are reflecting sensible heat between those plants. Now keep in mind, those were thick prairie grasses. And then, in our wisdom, we blame the tool. I've noticed with humans, we really like tools and process. And so the first thing when we say we're overgrazing the range, they blame the cow. And the moment we took the cow out of the system, we made it worse in a brittle environment. See, cows are needed. Dung and urine and manure, they're needed in the ecosystem. They stimulate nutrient cycling. But the moment we took them out, blame the cow, this is what happened. It made it worse. The real blame should have always been, let's look in the mirror. And then what happens on millions and millions of acres, you have more desertification going on. Look at the parts of the world that are becoming more desertified. I will tell you, I grew up in the Rockies of northern New Mexico. I go visit my parents on a regular basis. It hurts to go home. Now that I see, I want to have tears. I have tears in my eyes, and I say, God, how are we going to fix this land? It's so degraded, and it's going to take so much energy. How are we going to do this? And I'll show you how ranchers are doing that. But please understand, if we just look at one thing as CO2, we're missing the mark. It's the amount of heat coming off the land is also critical. Some soil temperatures in those areas reach about 160 degrees. 160 degrees. Kills microbes at 140. You denature enzymes about 113, 114. No nutrient cycling occurring. And it's growing more and more and more every year. And so what happens is when you have huge amount of heat, and you can tell every time you fly into Denver in any of these brittle environments, you can get in the plane and you're getting to really land, you can feel the plane shake. It's those currents of heat coming off because there's no vegetation. I think people forget you cannot have climate without plant and soil. Ecology says everything is connected, everything is one. It's connected. So we have huge amounts of surface that are pushing rain clouds away. It's not just CO2. CO2 is important, please don't misunderstand me. But the moment you look at it from a reductionist perspective, it's much more complex than we have ever imagined. So when I cross the country, this is what I see. The soil is naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever. This is happening globally. The biggest issue is we look at this beautiful ecosystem as a medium. That's the way we look at it, as a medium. Now, what are the impacts? I drive all over the country. I think I probably had one of the largest travel budgets as I was working with an NRCS employee. I have traveled millions of miles. I have been in every state, maybe once, 2 or 3 times, from Alaska to Puerto Rico to Hawaii, taught all types of people, exposed to all types of races. The thing that is very startling that is happening to our country, and it hurts to see this. As I travel in my vehicle, I see the dying of rural America. See, ladies and gentlemen, the blessings of the land actually flowed through the farmer and rancher. The rural community grew through the rancher and the farmer. The blessings of the land, the wealth of the soil flows through the farmer and rancher, and it went to the grocery store, to the local gas station. That's the way the blessings of the land flowed. Now, this is what is occurring. How many know in 2016, the Center of Disease said that farming and ranching are the top 30 careers that have the largest suicide rates? How can it be the people that are interfaced with God's creation daily have such a high suicide rate? See, when one understands their predicament. See, ladies and gentlemen, people don't realize that farmers, not only are they farm, but they're an engineer. They're a chemical engineer. They're a mechanical engineer. They're an agronomist. They're an ecologist. They're a marketer. They're an accountant. The skill set to be a farmer and rancher is incredibly complex, and yet they deal with a dynamic ecosystem that changes every second. The skill set to be a farmer that mimics nature, is incredible. I would argue that the most brilliant should be on the land because it's that difficult of a skill set. They deal with chaos. Chaos is unpredictability. That's why the stress. And on top of that, they maintain millions of dollars of infrastructure. I tell some of my farmer friends, you are the poorest millionaires I know. You maintain tractors, buildings. It's easy to go. Some of us here can go to a cubicle, all we have is a laptop. It's to make a decent living. They maintain millions of dollars of infrastructure to make maybe the same type of living. Then I said to myself, okay, Why is there so much ignorance? And including myself. So I came across Dr. Rosalind. He had a beautiful TED Talk. How not to be ignorant about the world. And he's called it the Ignorant Project. Sign me up. It was interesting. When he came out, he asked multiple choice questions to people in Sweden, USA, and the TED Talk participants. And the other group was the chimps. It was multiple choice. 3 questions about the world. Guess who won? The monkeys did. He said, why? Why are we so ignorant about our world? First one is personal bias. Everyone in this room, even our scientists, have personal bias. We interpret the world from our own context that we grew up. We interpret the farming the way we grew up within our context. We have personal bias. The only non-biased person I've ever met is a dead human being. The biggest struggle is to realize you have bias. If you overcome that, that is the first step to knowledge. And it can only come with humility. The other one, we're teaching outdated facts. Outdated facts. Our universities, our high schools, we're teaching just wrong information. It's outdated. And I was sitting with Jake, right next to me. He said, Ray, it's impossible to keep up with the knowledge. And to be honest with you, some of the knowledge was just based on the wrong premise. I'll talk about that in a while. So personal bias, outdated facts, and here's the third one that I thought was very interesting. Embellished news. News that just sells, that is not completely true. Bias, outdated facts, embellished news, then you get a human that gets skewed information and intuition. Intuition's powerful. It saves us from getting eaten up when we're out in the jungle. Powerful. The problem is bad information, intuition, the monkeys win. See, because the monkeys just go, Then, here's what we have. We have an upside down of the world, the way it works. Ecologically, or just in general. What I'm going to share with you is a correct view. But the first thing we have to overcome is the most difficult thing, and why our land is so degraded. Right here. See, as a water quality specialist, I used to sit at the end of the lake and the river and go, and I had to deal with it right there when it was too late. Same thing with CO2 up in the atmosphere. The real issue, the real start is right here. It's the way we see things is the problem. It commingled with our human nature, caused these environmental issues. See, if all of us would humbly go before and says, because my wife tells me, husband, you are 99.9% of your problem. And she is right. See, ladies and gentlemen, I just don't bring the sciences in. Science is critical. The sociology, the cultural aspect, the theology, all of it is needed in one. One thing that we love to do as humans, we like to delineate what is in common. Holism teaches connect the relationships. This is one of my favorite quotes dealing with humans. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Wonderful. So then, when I go out and teach and get ready to promote soil health, first things farmers tell me, but Ray, you don't understand, it's too cold. Then they also tell me, no, Ray, it's too hot. We can't do it here. That's too wet. They tell me all those things. Uh-oh. Guess what? I said, you know what? Well, how come we're doing no-till in Canada and Dakotas? How come we're doing it in Afghanistan? How come we're doing it in humid areas of Georgia and Arkansas? See, what we have taught, you got to show distinction, but rarely do we come back and say, what is in common in all those areas? What is common? So most times I tell producers, oh, you mean you don't have biology here? You mean it stopped at the border of Minnesota? Oh, I get it. Minnesota's special. See, biology trumps all that. Biology modifies the environment. I tell farmers, now farmers, that's a compaction issue. Let me pull out my tractor. How many have actually seen that? Raise your hand. I have seen it in the West, and I could never explain it. That plant is heavily mycorrhizal. Mycorrhizal fungi excrete these powerful enzymes, break rock down. The roots, when they respire, mix with water, carbonic acids. Bacteria break rock down. So the most powerful thing to fix compaction in any farm is life itself. But how do we approach it? Chemically and physically. Now, how do I attract farmers to come to my workshop? One of my favorite sayings by the Australians, you cannot be green unless you're in the black. See, it's easy we complain sometimes we have to go mow the lawn or do any expenditures, buy fertilizer in a small little area. Think about a farmer who owns thousands of acres and how much money it takes just to put cover crops. One time, it could be up to $30,000. Think about the scale. So what is causing this movement to grow? Right here. I approach farmers economically to get interested. Later, they fall in love with the land. Look at this, is from Canada. Look at the blue, you'll see, is the cost of inputs. From the beginning of 1926 to 2016. Look at the farm income. This is very similar in the United States. So what is making this movement growing in an amazing way? Why is it growing? Economics. See, economics means the money of the house. The ecology is the study of the house. I teach farmers, if you get the ecology, the economics will come. So this is so how do I get them to listen? Okay? These are two demonstrations we use very powerfully. Let me show you the first one.
I have a question to ask you. Is your soil healthy, functioning, and stable? One of the best diagnostic tools that I know of is the soil stability test. Here are two soils, exactly the same soil type. This soil has been tilled for 30 years. It is addicted to chemicals and fertilizer. This soil has not been tilled for 40 years. It is covered year-round with diverse plants. It is completely weaned from chemicals and fertilizer. Watch what happens when we drop the soil in the water.
These are the same soil types.
Notice how the conventional till soil is falling apart. The biotic glues in the organic matter are burned up by tillage. The soil pores have collapsed. Notice the no-till soil. The soil's holding together. The pore spaces are still intact. Do this test for yourself. I guarantee if you dig a little, you'll learn a lot.
It took me all day to get that one right. And the guy that did it to me says, Ray, you're the worst under camera, I know. But let me tell you, those are the same soil types. The soil on the left 6% organic matter. North Carolina, Ray Steyer's soils. The forest is 3%. The soil on the left is less than 0.5%. See, the soil on the left, when I told you yesterday, the first act of erosion is downward. Those clays you see in suspension will plug up the pores and the water will run off. I tell you, we don't have a runoff problem, we have an infiltration problem. The soil on the left is addicted to fertilizer and pesticides. Ray Steyer's no longer uses no fungicides, no insecticides, no chemical fertilizer, down to one herbicide. Healthy soils. Now, let me take it a little further.
To fully appreciate the potential runoff and erosion from a conventionally tilled field like this, you really need to be out here during the most intense thunderstorm of the year. Since most people aren't willing to do that, here in Virginia, we use a rainfall simulator to help our farmers tell the story of what happens when it rains really hard.
This is incredibly powerful.
On the left, we start with a tray of dry, loose soil taken from a clean till field. On the right, we start with a slice of intact surface soil from a long-term no-till field. This soil is not only protected with a mulch of cover crop residue, it also has a stable, porous sponge structure.
You know, years ago, as a kid, I remember, you know, you'd get these big, heavy thunderstorms in the summer, and it would just wash the field, and you'd end up with mud down on the road. And I'm talking about mud that you'd go over there with a skid loader and scoop out of the way so the cars could go down the road. What I'm seeing now is I'm seeing these heavy rainfalls, and I'm barely seeing a trickle coming out of the field.
After we simulate an extremely intense thunderstorm for 5 minutes, the differences are obvious. Most of the water we applied to this soil has run off into this jar, carrying away with it a thin but very significant layer of topsoil. We just applied 1.5 inches of very intense rainfall to this bare, tilled soil.
How much water entered?
Obviously, we harvested very little for future
plant use. Is that a
plant
functioning
use.
water cycle? And this is happening
Meanwhile,
globally.
This no-till soil has absorbed virtually every drop of water we applied. What little ran off is clear. The bottom line is pretty simple. If you want to harvest more rain like these no-till farmers are doing, keep your soil covered on top and make it a sponge underneath.
Okay, so what is happening? When you till, you insert oxygen into the soil, you wake up bacteria called R. strategists. They start to eat the aggregate. They eat the glue. See, scientists say those aggregates only last 27 days. They have to be continually be fed with, I call, the plant, the mouth of the soil. Ancients used to call it the mouth of the soil, because that's the way the soil eats. We need to build aggregates. No aggregates, no infiltration, no porosity, the water runs off. I start teaching basic things. Our job, capture energy, get the water cycle going. You cannot have a complete functioning water cycle without the plants creating aggregates and the bacteria and the organisms, and you can't have nutrient cycling, and you can't have diversity. We interface with this beautiful system at the ground level. All these processes are happening, and it's important how you manage the cattle. If you overgraze, look at here on the left. So it becomes hot. Weeds, look at when it's managed properly. It affects the ecosystem processes. So, what's the answer? What's the premise? Whoa, I got a little bit of music back there for you.
Biomimicry is innovation inspired by nature.
There we go. Did you see that? Biomimicry Institute. Folks, this is the premise that we should have built soil erosion service. Notice how SES was called initially. Soil erosion service. They called themselves the symptom. That was never the goal. We build agriculture on the wrong premise.
The premise should have always been this: how do we mimic it? Mimic nature was always the goal. It was always the premise. Look how beautiful the design. We are now doing eco-mimicry, biomimicry. What does it mean? What does the word mean? Mimic life. Ranchers and farmers should have a t-shirt, walk down the airport. What do you do for a living? I mimic life. That's the goal. If we get everybody to say, our goal is to mimic the template. Now, we are designing cover crop mixes that mimic the prairie. But instead, we've done this. We've used our old science, make nature into a machine of industry, a factory. See, biomimicry is on the right. Our forefathers were doing that. Has the method on the left hurt us? Yes. It has affected our health, affected our soils. It has affected everything. So I teach these principles. We talked about it. David talked about it. See, what I teach is principles. A great statistician once said, be careful with data or you'll drown in it. I'd rather have my farmers understand principles of ecology, of biomimicry. If you get the principles right, the methods will be millions, but you follow the principles. First one, David talked about it, living root 24/7. Why? Right here, this is a slow motion video showing liquid sun leaking into the soil, feeding microbes. This is our job, producers. Energy flow to feed these guys. Isn't she beautiful? I get emotional when I see that. Those are the babies I forgot. Even though I took a graduate level soil microbiology, soil ecology, it was left out. So what are we doing to follow that principle? We put living roots 24/7, and guess what else we do? We are doing this across the country. We are no-tilling corn and soybean into this multi-species mix that looks like the prairie. We are cutting our fertilizers, more than half. Farmers are no longer using fungicides, insecticides, because they're doing biomimicry. And it's spreading on hundreds of thousands of acres. Isn't that exciting? 4 to 5% of Indiana is covered. And this soil health movement started in 2007. Look at the skin, that's cotton. We're doing it. When they plant into it, you roll down the cereal rye. Do you see any weeds? Cereal rye suppresses quite a bit of weeds. Pigweed hates it. And so what we're doing there is creating the forest floor. The forest is covered with leaves. The prairie is covered with a grass. Isn't that beautiful? Saving farmers a lot of money. This is in our beloved Wisconsin, right next door. Tony Pidrick. He's planting green. He did not want to show this video, this picture, because of peer pressure. The peer pressure is brutal. Look at the corn pop out of that beautiful skin. Look what farmers are doing here. See? That, if you give farmers the right principles, they'll figure it out. That's not a sprayer, ladies and gentlemen. It is a cover crop seed planter planting corn, of cover crop into standing corn. I told you farmers are brilliant. They'll figure it out. So, which farmer's making money? Which one's not making money? Can anybody guess? See, that field here on the right, you have biological primers, energy transformers, nutrient sequesters, habitat modifiers. The farmer on the left is leaking nutrients, spilling sun, spending way huge amounts of money. The farmer on the right, by the way, that is Pennsylvania, that's Illinois on the left. When I drove here, guess what I saw in our beloved state here? I saw the left. Most of the country will be like in the left. So, let's go to the next one. So that's what we want right here, so that we regulate the temperature. Look at the temperature difference when you have the skin. Huge difference. We got to limit chemical and physical disturbance. This gets tough. We got to be careful with our tillage. Tillage is destructive to the house. Spraying fungicides, insecticides hurt this. Look at right here, this little tiny video. On the right, you see all the critters together. This is nutrient cycling. This is the water cycle all together. They help with the water cycle. I would have never thought that biology had a lot to do with the water cycle. They create the aggregates. See, the water cycle is not complete unless we have aggregates. The water cycle has to be complete when the water goes in. Okay? So it's very critical. So, increased plant and animal species diversity. Oh, by the way, I tell farmers, the more you disc that, the more you spray that, you have to write the front of the check. The less you bother it, you start writing the back of the check. They like that. And we forget one. Animals. Nature does not farm without animals. Every natural ecosystem has animals. My business partner, friend, mentor, just came out with a book, Dirt to Soil. He said, I used to get up every morning to see what I had to kill that day. Now I get up every morning, how can I mimic nature and bring life onto his ranch? Let me tell you, this is just recent data that just came out. A third party came in and did this data. It was by Landstream, Dr. John Norman with 3 or 4 PhDs, Wisconsin, Nebraska. They just did an independent study on Gabe Ranch on 523 acres. Look at the average carbon sequestered on his ranch, over 92 tons of carbon per acre. Look at the US average, 10 to 30. This will be published in a couple of years once we get more money to finish the research. Over extremely replicated, brilliant. So we're showing if you apply all the principles, it only took him 8 years. Some of our young farmers who are doing all the principles right away do it quicker. Then we're going to wrap it up here with our beloved Chihuahua. New Mexico State is right at the southern tip where I went to college. Let me give you a little perspective of where I went to college. Or I also worked there within RCS. We did all the work in the morning because when it got to noon, you could fry an egg on the sidewalk. 110, 112 degrees. It is brutal. I think it's about 1 degree. I grew up in the northern and the Rocky, and it took me years from Hades to get acclimated. Let me show you what the Chihuahuan Desert looks like. Look what they have to deal with. How are we going to fix that system all over the West? The reason I chose this, if ranchers can make it work there in the hottest, more brutal environment, why can't we do it here? Let me show you their problems. They only get 3 to 6 inches. How come they have massive erosion like that with only 3 to 6 inches of rain? Through holistic management, through changing their lives, using the Alan Savory method, which, by the way, changed me. When I first read his book, Get to Gabe's Place, I go, whoa, I got it. I missed it. I just got back from Chihuahua 4 months ago. Look what they have done. Just cattle. You know, Dr. Becky, I tell you, this is probably one of the best conferences, but when I went to Chihuahua, I have to say that was the best one. Because I saw that and I walked the ranches. How did it start? One leader that changed the way they see things. Look what they've done. In biblical proportions, the desert is coming back to be a prairie. Masanobu Fukuoka, one of my favorite heroes, he taught me more ecology, he's Japanese. He said he thought that most deserts were all man-made. I kind of believe that. So how are they doing it? Real quick. So I could not wrap my mind because there's nothing to eat on the right side. How can cows eat? So what they do, there's a concept called mobile link, the ecologist called. Cows are mobile, but they're a link to the natural processes. Cows are powerful. Look, his ranch on the left, his ranch used to be like that on the right, bringing the cattle, and that has changed. But what they do start first, they start off with a good patch that looks like on the left, and then they bring the animals and move them like this, like giant buffalo, and they use cowboys. And then the animals distribute the manure very closely. I want manure every square foot. The hoofs break up the crust. And then the cows do the most powerful thing they do. They put it on the land. A lot of energy goes right there. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a cow pie in the desert, where the cow put that energy. Look what happens. And I get so frustrated to hear the argument, well, we got to eat less meat. No, we need more meat, but we need it to be raised like buffalo, not in the industrial complex that we have. Frustrating. The cow is not the problem. We're the problem. Look at the prairie. Grasses choke out the cactus. And then guess what else comes? The wildlife. So, people said, okay, so what can we do? What can we do? First, folks, every one of us has to make this personal. The way you buy food. Let thy food be thy medicine. You want to stay healthy? Never go to the hospital. I'm not being critical. Look, the thing is, we need food. Food is our nutrition. If the soil is depleted, if you don't have a healthy soil, you don't have a healthy plant, you don't have a healthy animal, you don't have a healthy human. We have lost 50% of our nutrient density. What's the other obstacles? The ag complex. Please understand, everybody built agriculture on the wrong premise. There's forces. You got to buy tillage. You got to buy spray machine. You don't understand how the farmer's barraged every day. Our ag policy, peer pressure is brutal. I had a rancher tell me, Ray, Idaho, said, I went first and I went to no-till. I went to the local hardware store and somebody, one of the other ranchers and farmers said, you are degrading the resource because it was out of the norm. The peer pressure is brutal. The other, we have a lack of understanding, and here's another thing that's very difficult to overcome. 60 to 70% of the land is rented. People who rent the land don't usually take care of it. And many absentee landowners don't know what's going on to the land as long as they get their check. So what are we doing? Changing everything. We can only change it if we change this world here, the heart and mind, through education, teaching people to be leaders holistically, now they have the right paradigm. So that's why we created Soil Health Academy. Let ranchers and farmers teach others They have the right premise. Wrapping it up here, one of my favorite quotes: people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Know your why. Some of the top ranchers and farmers, they share their knowledge. Why do they do it? Because they love the land and they love the people. And they love the Creator and the creation. They are the most giving, the top 1% that share their knowledge. I definitely recommend these two books. Start with your why. I told the young people here, I'm impressed with these college students here. I tell them, start with your why. If you know your why, you will love your job for the rest of your life. And one of my favorite books, Leaders Eat Last. Like I said, Simon went all over the world. And I'll never forget the imagery when he showed it in his video. In a war-torn area, there was this mother that was nestled and covering up this little toddler so she wouldn't be hit with bullets. Simon Sinek, that's the kind of leadership we need. Leaders that will, out of love, that will sacrifice their lives for the whole. I made a comment yesterday. How many do we have leaders in Washington, D.C. that will sacrifice themselves for a whole? That's why the Marine Corps, they build a brothership, a brotherhood, a community. We need community of farmers and ranchers that have that same love for each other, that they don't feel they're competing with each other. Our individualism is powerful, but it hurt us. We need to learn more from the Eastern cultures of community. Last one, last two slides. See, leaders eat last. Leaders make you safe. Now I notice the leaders don't give you a conservation plan. Plan's good, but they are there with you. Leaders inspire. Plans do not inspire anyone. Tools do not inspire. Science does not inspire. I love science. I have 8 years of university study. Love inspires. When you're willing to die for your people and sacrifice yourself, then we will change this world. David, last slide. His book, Growing a Revolution. You remember David speaking here. David was very, like he said, he was pessimistic. He didn't know it was going to happen. When he went to Dave's ranch, when he went all over, he walked away and says, we can do this. We can do this. And I'm telling you, I will share the last thing and get off the podium, promise. Yesterday, an elderly gentleman came up, and he walked. He could barely walk up here, and he could barely speak, and he just kind of breathed, and you could tell it was a struggle for the words to come out. And you know what he said? What can I do? Sir, I gave you a wrong answer. I told him, buy quality food. That's only one. I want to say this to you, if you're there, sir. Let's pray for our leaders. Pray for each other. Let's help each other out. That should have been the first one. And then demand quality. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you, there's a famine in the land, an incredible famine. A famine of quality food, quality land, and quality people of integrity. Let's become those people of quality. Thank you so much.